both of us in our cycling journeys have made some pretty catastrophic mistakes, but we've learned a fair deal of stuff along the way. 10 things I wish I knew when I started.
All right, so my first one is, it's really about the times that I have failed.
I haven't known anyone ever that's gained weight by eating too much during a ride.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty much impossible.
It took me years to figure out that there's a better way to do this.
Yeah. I think part of that is just like, we're not special and we're not going to reinvent the wheel, and like, just stop pretending. Just someone has figured it out. Somebody's really good. Just follow a path.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Anthony. I'm a former lawyer turned cyclist turned podcast host who's based in Ireland. My goal with this channel is to introduce you to the people and to the ideas to help you optimize your health, your happiness, and your longevity. Now, I know we've all heard the saying, to err is human, right? Well, let me tell you, when it comes to cycling, both amateurs and pros make mistakes. Mistakes that cost you not just your time, but they compromise your motivation and they undermine your health. Now, imagine if you could avoid these pitfalls from the get-go. Imagine setting off on your cycling journey armed with wisdom gleaned from years of collective experience. That's why I've invited a special guest today, Josh Ross from Cycling News. Josh is tech genius when it comes to all things cycling. He's ridden from the wet terrains of the Pacific Northwest to the arid desert landscapes, and together today we're going to share 10 things we wish we knew when we started cycling. But hang on one second, this isn't just going to be a tech video. Josh and I will be diving into our own personal cycling archives to reveal the mistakes, sometimes embarrassing, that we've made over the past decade. Trust me, you'll want to learn from our mistakes rather than making them for yourself. Now, before I jump into the show, I do have one small favour to ask. Please take a second to subscribe to this channel, as still around 90% of the viewers aren't subscribed. And the bigger this channel gets, the bigger the guests I can attract. This is the Roadman Cycling Podcast, and now, my dear friends, it's Mr. Josh Ross. Josh, welcome back to the Roadman Cycling Podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It was a lot of fun last time. It's great to be back.
We had this concept we were talking about off air. Both of us in our cycling journeys have made some pretty catastrophic mistakes, but we've learned a fair deal of stuff along the way. So I had this idea of transporting ourselves back to the very beginning with the knowledge that we've gained along the way, because I know there's a listener tuning in right now that's at the very start of the journey that would benefit a lot from our learnings along the way. So we want to create a little podcast on 10 things I wish I knew when I started, and we're going to sort of do it in a format where Josh is going to give one of his learnings, I'm going to give one of my learnings, and we can both kind of rib on each other's. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't disagree, and we'll see how it works. Josh, since you are the guest, I think it would be only polite for me to let you go first.
I appreciate it. All right, so my first one is, it's really about the times that I have failed, because I do long rides. Like, that's my thing, long endurance stuff, 100, 200, 300 miles. And the first one is, when you feel like you can't keep going, you need to eat. And really what this is about, it's not a bigger thing about nutrition necessarily. It's just, I have failed things where I have stopped. I have felt like I wasn't trained enough. I couldn't keep going. And like, I just didn't want to do this. And, I'll be back next year to train with better training. And really, all I had to do was eat, like, a lot.
I love that one because it also, thinking about when I was getting started, the power of stopping to eat. Yeah, we can jump into all the grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per hour that the World Tour guys are using now. But very simply, when you're getting started, stopping to eat has a beautiful way of segmenting a ride. It's like when you're reading a long story and you get to the end of a paragraph, there's almost like a exhalation. Now I can regroup and go again. That's why I used to love stopping to just eat. It's that little bit of time to pause and reflect.
Yeah, actually, that's what I do on my long rides. Get to the top of the climb, take a minute, enjoy the view, eat some food. But then I have also found that there are times where, like, now I know there's this feeling where I just need to eat like a lot, like, 400, 500, 600 calories. Like, I gotta inhale some food. And I would have finished many things that I didn't if I had just known that.
Well, a great tip I heard from a friend who inherited from another friend of his world tour, and that's how a lot of this stuff is passed along, whispers and whispers and whispers. But if you get home from a ride and your first thought is, man, I need to eat, you've underfueled on that ride. You almost can't overeat on a ride during a ride. Like the logistics of overeating on a ride are very difficult. I've known many people that have gained weight off the bike by eating too much. I haven't known anyone ever that's gained weight by eating too much during a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's pretty much impossible. I did some metabolic testing recently with a company called Instinct, and
Oh yeah, I had Sebastian Weber on the podcast. Really interesting guy.
nice. Yeah, I love their system is really cool. But what it came down to for me is if I ride at 165 watts and eat 400 calories an hour, I should be able to basically ride forever. But eating 400 calories an hour, that is really hard.
It's really hard, and a great tip for that for people is it's dividing your calories up between solids and liquids. So having some carbohydrates in your bottle. But I also like to, especially when I'm racing, subdivide my solids into stuff that's more homemade, like rice cakes, homemade flapjacks, and more race specific stuff. Like I've been using the Velo Forte products. They seem to sit with my stomach quite well. But eating Velo Forte bars and gels, as palatable as I find them, eating them for the entire ride never sat well for me. So having that mix of something like a rice cake from Hannah Grant's cookbook or one of these World Tour chefs, that always just seemed to work well. Or even a baguette. I'm exposing my time racing in France there, where you literally get sandwiches going out training off the DS, but it works.
Yeah. You have to just change things all the time. You should be eating all kinds of some salty, some sweet, some like just different all the time. As if you try to do like I do these long rides, if I try to eat for like 12 hours, just one thing, it'll just after a while you just like you cannot nothing through these lips, and then it just starts a downward spiral.
Okay, my turn. The one I wish I knew at the very start, I call it now headless chicken riding. When I started out cycling, I didn't know anything about different training zones. Now I know there's zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a associated physiological adaptation with spending time in each of these zones. Like if I want to increase my ability to oxidate fat, if I want to improve my mitochondrial density, I'll spend time riding in zone 1 and zone 2. I knew none of that. So headless chicken, I was going out the door with no plan, no idea what ride I was doing. And I was essentially just trying to maximize my available training time. And what that looked like for me was defaulting into always riding kind of hard. So if I had an hour available or 90 minutes available, I went out and it was always tight chain. It was always nearly like a TT for the available amount of time I had. If it was 4 hours on a Sunday or it was an hour on a Tuesday, it was just hard. And what ended up happening to me there was I defaulted into zone 3. And not that there's anything inherently wrong with riding in zone 3, but I only ever got the narrow benefit of those physiological adaptations associated with zone 3. And I never got any of the benefits of riding in zone 1, zone 2, zone 4, zone 5, zone 6. And it took me years to figure out that there's a better way to do this.
Well, I mean, the trap of zone 3 that new cyclists need to know and don't know is that it feels like you're riding really hard, but you're actually not riding that hard. So if you're just like, oh, I'm going to go out and do a hard ride, you'll default to zone 3, but really you need to be in zone 4, 5, 6 if you're going to ride hard, and you can't do that all the time. So yeah, I mean, that's a really good, and that was on my list too, which is just the idea that you shouldn't be riding hard all the time. And I have since learned that you can actually be a really strong cyclist never riding hard. Not that you necessarily want to do that, but like you could.
Yeah, the problem with riding medium hard all the time is it's so fatiguing because you're never riding easy that when it does come time to ride really, really hard, you don't have that freshness. And I
Absolutely.
talked to Joe Frio recently on the podcast, and he's 80 and he looks phenomenal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the author of Cyclist Training Bible. He
Yes.
looks phenomenal at 80 years of age. He was saying to me the secret to it is 2 super hard workouts per week. But super hard means super hard. Like your VO2 max efforts were described to me by an old coach, Michael Barry, as go until you see Jesus. And I
Yeah,
say
that's
this
a
all the
great
time to
description.
clients, go till you see Jesus. But you can't do that if you're riding around like 90% of your time in zone 3. You're too fatigued.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just talking to a friend about how he said I think I test better than I can actually ride, and he had this idea that like he was somehow breaking his FTP test. And I was like, no, it's just threshold is really hard. People don't think that, like, people have no concept that threshold is really hard. And if you just try to do whatever without that sort of structure, yeah, you won't really be in threshold. You'll be in zone 3 and you'll just be like, kind of hard, not hard.
You know what? We're so conditioned to watching the pros on TV and hearing this, like, oh, and they done a narrower threshold on this climb, or they rode the last climb at 7.6 watts per kilogram. We don't realize that these people aren't human. These are closer to robots than they are humans. They're like cyborgs from another planet. Like, most of us have conflicting demands on our time, and that means conflicting demands on our energy and multiple ways that our cortisol is getting driven up. So for us to go out and do 225 minutes after work at threshold, that's a hard workout.
Yeah, it is really, really hard.
I forgot, is it me yet next or you next?
It is me next. Okay, so I am the tech guy, and truthfully, this is the only one that's super tech focused, but I was working on our power meter buyer's guide recently, and this is a long-standing thing that I have told people. If you want to be fast on a bike, forget about the frames or the wheels. If you want to be fast on a bike, a power meter is the best investment you can make. And it's not like magic, like really nice wheels. You put them on, you feel faster, you look faster, the bike is great. But when you stare at your power number all the time, that is where like everything changes. You start to have this, even if you don't do any specific training, you start to have this understanding of how you can ride and how hard you're riding. And then when you just sort of read about whatever, like it's just like we were talking about, when you just sort of read about threshold versus zone 2 versus whatever, you then, once you have those numbers all the time, you're like, oh, like you get it in a way that you can't. And even if you do nothing but throw a power meter on your bike and put the number on your computer, it will make you faster.
And they're so affordable now.
Yeah.
Like my first power meter, I'm not sure if I shared this story with you last time you were on the podcast. My first power meter was 2006, 2005. It cost me €2,500 for an SRM. I was a student who didn't have €2,500. So I went to the bank and I told them I needed a loan for a car to go in and out to university. And I bought an SRM power meter, one of the wired ones that I still loved it. And I'm still fighting Bluetooth, hoping they'll go back to wires, because if it didn't work, you just wiggle it. It was cool. But it was amazing. It totally revolutionized cycling for me. And now I look, I'm not sure, what are you recommending in terms of buyer's guides in parameters, but all of the brands seem so affordable and so good now.
The thing with the buyer's guides is there's different things for different people. If you But the one that I usually tend to tell people is like, you just want to get started, you just want something that works and is inexpensive, then the 4i is a good way to go. The one that I really like recently is the Rotor. They had the 2 in power SL. It's about $1,000, and it's a beautiful crank to start with. And then it has true left-right power, so you can see which leg is doing which. And you don't necessarily need that, but it's fairly affordable for what it is, and I like that one.
And the beauty of it now is you can pair data you get from that power meter with an app like the Breakaway app, which is using artificial intelligence to coach people. And it's like, I don't know, it's $2.99 a month or something like that. And you have a coach. Back when I got my SRM at first, it was like, I was like trying to decode the like Da Vinci Code. I was trying to get Hunter Allen's and Kogan's handbook and reading through it after school and trying to piece this stuff together myself with PubMed articles. And knowledge was very closely protected now. It's been totally democratized since then. So you can take that power meter and you can actually train like the best riders in the world instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, you the power meter. You can dive into it as deep as you want to dive into it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it just doesn't matter what wheels you have. You get yourself a power meter if you want to be fast. Now, there's nothing wrong with good wheels too.
Let me take a second to talk about today's show sponsor because I've something really exciting to share with you. It's a game changer that's been making a noticeable difference in my performance recently, especially when it comes to sleep. Allow me to introduce you to Pillar. While we're all familiar with the importance of electrolytes and carbohydrates in our race preparation, Pillar is taking a different route. It's focusing on something called micronutrition, ensuring that you're ready to perform even before you ever hit the start line. It's all about promoting a good night's sleep, facilitating effective recovery, and replenishing those crucial micronutrients so you can perform at your best. Over the past month, I've been incorporating Pillar's triple magnesium supplement into my routine. I take it every evening, about 30 minutes or so before bed, and I've seen a remarkable improvement in my sleep quality. I've been tracking my sleep with my Whoop device, and the results, they're there every morning when I wake up in black and white. I'm waking up with about a 10% improvement in my restorative sleep. I'm waking up feeling refreshed. Having had that deep restorative sleep, I'm now ready to attack work, training, and life the next day. But don't just take my word for it. Let the data from your fitness tracker tell the story. So if you're ready to elevate your performance and the quality of your sleep, why not give Pillar a try? Head over to pillarperformance.shop and use the code ROADMAN on your local website for 15% off your first order. Or for US listeners, if you head over to defeed.com/pillar and use code ROADMAN for the same 15% off your order. The details of this offer are in the description below. Now back to the show. That actually segues nice into my next point. I call it the GPS. And right now I explain it to people as if you get into a car and you're using GPS or one of the old school Garmin's on your dashboard, it needs to know a couple of different data points to understand the journey. It needs to know what your starting point is. It needs to know where you're going. And from those two, it can plot the smoothest path between A and B. As a cyclist, I never knew that. And if I could journey back and say to myself, okay, know your starting point, have your power profile test where you're understanding your 10-second power, your 30-second power, 5-minute power, 20-minute power, and then know where you're going. Like, what's your goal this season? What's your goal over the next 2 years, 5 years? Because once I know where I am and where I'm going, now I can start to use amazing tools like parameters to plot the smoothest journey between point A and point B that navigates around my lifestyle. And very soon you start to realize, okay, this is an impossible journey. Like if I get into my car in London and I want to drive to New York and I only have 10 hours available, my GPS is just going to go, well, you have to cross seas. This is an impossible journey to make in this time frame. Much the same, people set out and they don't understand this. They have a goal of maybe riding a professional stage race, or they have a goal of getting a professional contract, and their starting point is quite low. That's their goal. And the amount of time they're allocating each week to this journey is like 5 hours a week. You can say off the bat, well, this is an impossible journey. Like, set a more realistic goal, and they're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of the sport by chasing something that's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder that in my discussion about the power meters that I sometimes forget to sort of wrap around the back of what are the tools actually doing, which is, yeah, you have this idea of what you want to do with it. They tend to be fairly driven, and I think that many cyclists are. Uh, so yeah, just understand, what are you going to do? What is possible? What is,
Well,
yeah, yeah. All right,
well,
let's
you're
see
up.
what I got. So my next one is if you have a distance goal, ride your own pace. And this is really, I can remember the thing about eating and this one really in many ways came from a Rafa Festive 500 ride that I did where it was 500K in one shot in the winter, in the cold. And you're supposed to do it with a teammate. My teammate the night before said, you know what? Can't do this. So I was like, okay. I showed up the morning of the ride and I paired up with some guys and they were way too fast for me. And I chased them for 200 miles and didn't eat and I failed that ride because I didn't ride my own pace. Also because I didn't eat, but like I can do 500K. I just need to just do my thing. Just like trust in yourself and just do your thing.
It's toxic for so many reasons because when you're on the edge like that, everything is slightly compromised. Your decision making is compromised, so you're more likely to slide out on a corner or misjudge a descent. Also, when you're in the red, your nutrition and hydration just goes to absolute pieces. And when you're not staying on top of your nutrition strategy, then it becomes a double self-fulfilling prophecy. You're already in the red, so you're not eating, and now you're more in the red because you're not eating. So it's just a bad news sandwich.
Yeah, and so now if I'm gonna do, I did something in Czech this summer, and I started the ride with three guys, and they were all strong riders, and they were only gonna do a couple hours. They were just like seeing me off, and I was gonna do, from Prague to Vienna, and I just knew, like, as we're going up the climbs, don't chase them. There's absolutely no reason. Just ride my pace. I look at my power meter. I know where I'm supposed to be. I just do my thing. It was no problem.
It also flips the other way as well, that you are better off, I find, riding your pace rather than sitting back and waiting for people who are slower than you, because they can often end up abandoning rides like that. You can end up getting frustrated. Maybe again, you don't stay on top of your nutrition strategy because it's too easy now and you don't feel like you need to eat. Both of them are, maybe it's not as toxic as trying to stick with fast people, but I've had rides ruined where I've held back too much as well.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I will be honest, I don't find myself in that position that often, but it's usually when I'm the fast person, it's on a short ride. It's the long ones where I'm like, because I'm better at pacing now. I have learned, like, you just got to do this thing.
I've got one. It's probably my favorite one out of all of mine that I wish I knew at the very start. And it comes from a really aspirational character on my local group ride. He's a legend here in Irish cycling called Sean Lally. He's 84 years old and he's still on our group ride every Saturday. And he'd still crush most Cat 3 males around the world at 84 years of age. If you look at him from the waist down, he looks 16. His legs are tanned, veined. But he said to me one day, the best advice he could ever give to somebody is watch the good lads. And I just sat with it and I was like, I don't really understand it. And the longer I sat with it and tried to unpack it, watch the good lads is so powerful because if you're out on a ride, when are the good lads putting their rain capes on? When are they taking them off? They're taking them off they don't take their hands off the bars in dangerous crosswind sections. They take their hands off the bars when they go past the hedgerow. They take the rain jacket on and off very fast in the most sheltered areas. They drink at the appropriate times. They get out of the saddle without pushing their bike back. They corner smooth. They have it nailed, and it's so nuanced. And the more you watch the good lads, the more you can learn. When I went to France racing, we had a term that just banged into anyone who's been in France racing. It's le métier. And le métier in English is no real direct translation, but it's kind of the apprenticeship or the craft to becoming a cyclist. And I can't think of anything more central to the craft of becoming a cyclist than this learning almost by osmosis from the good lads.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think part of that is just like we're not special and we're not going to reinvent the wheel and like just stop pretending. Just someone has figured
Yeah.
it out. Somebody's really good. Just follow a path.
Yeah, like you can iterate upon their learnings, but like you said, it's just don't try and figure it out from scratch on
Yeah.
your own. Excuse the short interruption, but I wanted to find a way to bring our little community together, to problem solve, to share training advice, and to support each other in what can sometimes be a lonely road as we all chase health, happiness, and longevity through cycling. To facilitate this, I've set up a Discord channel. I'm going to leave a link in the description down below. It doesn't cost anything to join. It's totally free. Plus, I'm also picking out random winners for spot prizes inside the Discord channel. If you'd like to join it, click on the link down below.
All right, let's see here. Okay, so this is sort of a funny phrasing, but a long ride is just like a short ride, but longer. And
You're going to have to unpack
yeah,
that one for me.
so I actually still sometimes do this, where I go, oh, I'm gonna do this big ride. So and I get nervous about it, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna need this, and I'm gonna need this, and like, there's all this stuff, and it's like, no, what I go out and I do like, let's say 2, 3 hour ride around my house all the time, and certain things unfold a certain way. Like my bike doesn't suddenly explode and I need like extra pieces and like it just when I go out for 20 hours, it is essentially the same. Like I have never had some crazy thing happen on some long ride that was somehow different from home. And more I am learning that like it's just the same. Yes, you're on your bike longer, but like everything's going to be okay. You've practiced, like just take a deep breath. So I see this come up for new cyclists more. They're going to do their first century ride, right? And there's this big thing, and they think, oh my God, like I need to like do this, so all this stuff somehow different. And it's like, no, you have done your training, you know what it's like. It will be the same. Yes, it'll be a little longer, but like it's the same.
And technology is such a safety net now as well. Like I remember when I lived in Toronto, I used to do long training rides, but I didn't have an international data plan on my mobile phone. So if I was heading like 4 hours, I was living at the kind of edge of Toronto on the northern edge, and I used to ride north, and I had a section, I called it the kill zone. It was like, if anything happens to me up here, I'm so far from being able to like hum a lift, call into somebody's house to ask to make a phone call, I'm just screwed. So the kill zone was the place I was like always breathe a sigh of relief when I got through the kill zone. It's not actually called a kill zone. It was just
Yeah,
my term
totally.
for it. But right now it's like, just pick up your phone and hit an Uber and you're back home.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Like you'll figure it out. I mean, that's another piece of this is that whatever crazy thing you think might happen, like first of all, it probably won't. But if something does happen, you will figure it out. You'll figure it out. Like it will not be, you're not putting your life in danger. I guess maybe there's somebody that is, but like you're doing a century right. You'll figure it out. It's fine.
Another one, I made this mistake for so long. It's recovery isn't just for pros. We're so conditioned to looking at professional riders in their space boots that inflate and are filled with chilly water that we think, oh, they need it because they're just finishing the Tour de France sort of Vuelta stage. That's not for me. And for years, I used to look at my schedule and I'd say, okay, so I've college classes all day until maybe 7 p.m. and I can come home and I can squeeze in like a 2 hour training ride. So I'd ride from like 7:30 to 9:30, come home, have dinner, go to bed. I would have been much better riding for 60 minutes and coming home and having some recovery, stretching, doing some foam roll and getting a proper recovery drink. But I never prioritized any of these things. And it was only when I got a chance to ride with some better riders that I got this phrase engraved into my head where they said, hard training doesn't make you faster. Hard training gives you the potential to be faster, and that potential is realized once you recover properly. And I had this light bulb moment going, like those days I was coming in at like 9:30 at night on my hands and knees and literally falling into bed and thinking I was training hard, that level of fatigue meant I was training harder than everyone else. It didn't. That level of fatigue just meant that I was ruined. My body was close to shutting down. That's not a normal level of fatigue. So I wish I knew that.
I mean, that is very much about our earlier discussion about like understanding when to ride hard and when to not ride hard, and like that whole idea of like you just can't be everything all the time. You can't go 10-10. You need to just like dial back, and sometimes that means not
But
even being on the bike.
there's some really cool recovery gadgets now for like optimizing recovery. Like I'm thinking, I mentioned the kind of space boots, but I've played around with a power dot as well, like those electromagnetic stimulators. There's massage guns or anything else that you've come across.
For me, the best recovery is just to have this schedule and then listen to my body where I go, okay, so I ride 5 days a week. I take 2 different days off, and those are like protected recovery. I do not ride on those days. But then midweek, if I'm just like feeling like just terrible, like, no, just it's okay. I'm not going to lose any fitness. In fact, I'll probably gain it. Just like take the time. And so, in terms of gadgets and stuff, I don't have a lot of recommendations. For me, it's more about just listening to my body.
I also love the sea. That's like it's free. I live right beside the sea. That's a very powerful recovery tool for me. On a recovery day, I'll often do 60 minutes, and even on a cold, wet day, finishing the session by jumping into the sea. I don't know, it just feels like we're meant to be in the sea.
And that's cool. That's a cool. I don't actually live that close to the ocean these days, but that is a cool. idea.
All right, you're
All
up.
right, so this is the last one, and in many ways we already talked about this. In fact, I think I just said it a second ago, but not every ride has to be or should be max intensity. And that's, we've talked about this a lot, but it's just ride, just hike. I guess what I would say to put a different spin on it for this bullet point is that make sure you have fun, because if you're just like out there just miserable, just like every ride as hard as you can, it's like, is that really what you want to do on a bike? Maybe just like go out, chat with your friends, have fun, just a mellow ride sometimes.
We couldn't have queued that one up more perfectly for my final one, because this is something that I wish somebody had told me when I first started having aspirations of chasing professional contracts and traveling abroad, winning races with my bike. I got so caught up in the numbers, in the metrics, in being, quote unquote, the best, that I forgot why I started cycling in the first place. That cycling isn't this imaginary destination that when you get there, everything is going to be perfect and you're going to suddenly find happiness. Cycling, it's about the journey. It's about the day to day. It's about the wind in your face, the sun on your back. It's about the trails, the road, the adventures. It's about that sense of fatigue and accomplishment you feel after a long ride, or the camaraderie when you're riding with friends, or that deep connection even you get with nature when you go on a solo spin through these scenic and epic landscapes. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in the competitive aspects, whether that's beating your own Strava time or chasing a pro contract. But for me, cycling has been much more rewarding since I took a moment to appreciate why I started and to appreciate the world around me, and even the subtle changes in seasons and animals. And I wish I knew that at the very start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good one. And that is really about just enjoying yourself. I mean, yeah, I get to ride in such beautiful, amazing places. And there were times in my life when all I did was stare at my bike computer. And now I'm like, no, I'm gonna look around.
Josh, I love this conversation. I think it's going to be valuable for so many people starting out their journey in cycling. I'm sure myself and yourself are going to make a lot more mistakes as we continue on our cycling road. So we'll get you back to recap more of that at some time down the road. Josh, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed that episode, please press here for another conversation that I know you're going to love. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your club mates.